She smiled in a way that made my mind wander. And I remember thinking how strange it was that something so small could rearrange the rest of my afternoon. It wasn't flirtatious. That's the part one kept circling back to. It wasn't the kind of smile that asks for anything. It just landed, like she'd noticed something about me before I'd figured out how to hide it. I worked the front desk at a small independent bookstore that sat wedged between a dry cleaner and a dentist's office. The kind of place that smelled like dust and paper and coffee someone reheated too many times. Most days were slow. Regulars, returns, the quiet shuffle of people pretending not to eavesdrop on each other's conversations. She came in on a Tuesday afternoon, rain still clinging to her coat. Mid-40s, maybe older. Hair pulled back loosely, like she'd done it without a mirror. No rush in her movements. She paused just inside the door, letting her eyes adjust, as if she wanted to understand the place before stepping fully into it. I noticed the shoes first. Worn, practical. Then the way she held her bag close, not defensively, just habit. She drifted toward the non-fiction shelves, fingertips brushing spines without pulling anything out. I went back to sorting a stack of returns, though my attention kept slipping. When she finally brought a book to the counter, she didn't slide it toward me right away. She stood there, waiting, watching me finish what I was doing. "Take your time," she said, voice low, amused. "I'm not going anywhere." I nodded too quickly. "Sorry. Yeah. It's fine," she repeated, softer this time. The book was something dense. Essays. The kind people buy because they want to feel steadier, not entertained. I scanned the barcode, glanced at the price, then back at her. "Good choice," I said, immediately hating how generic it sounded. She tilted her head. "You've read it." "Parts," I said. A pause. "Okay, one chapter." I didn't finish it. She smiled then. Not wide, not polite. Something knowing flickered across her face. "I never finish books like that either," she said. "I just like starting them." That felt like a confession, even if it wasn't meant to be. While the receipt printed, she reached into her bag, then stopped. Her fingers hovered, indecisive. "Do you still do that thing?" she asked. "Will you write notes inside if someone asks?" I blinked. "Yeah, if you want." She slid the book toward me, then hesitated again. "Just the date," she said. "I like remembering when things begin." I wrote it carefully, suddenly aware of my hand, the way it curved around the pen. When I passed the book back, our fingers brushed, not a spark, not electricity, just warmth. Real and brief and gone too fast to comment on. She tucked the book under her arm and lingered. "You're younger than I expected," she said, then laughed quietly. "I don't know why I thought that. Is that bad?" I asked. She studied me for a second. "Longer than necessary." "No," she said. "Just different." A silence settled between us. Not awkward exactly. Just unfinished. Someone coughed in the back of the store. The heater clicked on. "Well," she said finally, adjusting her coat. "Thanks for not rushing." "Anytime," I replied, and meant more than the word aloud. She reached the door, then glanced back. That was when she smiled again, the same way as before, and for some reason, my chest tightened. After she left, I realized I'd written the date wrong. A day ahead, as if some part of me had already decided that what just happened mattered more than it should have. I kept thinking about that smile. Not what it promised, but what it noticed. The second time I saw her, it wasn't accidental. She came in asking for help this time. Actually asked, standing a little closer to the counter than before, fingers resting flat on the wood like she needed the contact. "I'm looking for something specific," she said, "but I don't know what it's called." That felt deliberate, even if it wasn't. I stepped out from behind the desk, gestured toward the back shelves. "You can show me what you mean." She followed, slower than me. I noticed the way she paused between aisles, reading signs like she didn't fully trust them. The store was quieter than usual. Late afternoon light slid through the front windows and stopped halfway down the floor, leaving the rest of the place dimmer, heavier. She explained what she wanted in fragments. Something about change. About not starting over, exactly, but adjusting. She laughed once while talking, then stopped herself, like she'd given away too much. "I don't need advice," she added quickly. "Just words." "Someone else's?" I nodded, even though I wasn't sure what she was really asking for. As I scanned the shelves, I became aware of how close she was standing. Not touching, but near enough that I could smell rain again, faint and clean. Her hands were folded together, thumbs worrying each other. The confidence from the first day wasn't gone. It was just tired. "You don't have to rush," she said, echoing herself from before. Then quieter, "I'm sorry. I do that. I apologize for things that aren't problems." "It's okay," I said. "I notice." She glanced at me sharply, then looked away. We found book eventually. She held it, but didn't open it. Just stared at the cover like it might answer back. "Do you ever feel like you're late to your own life?" she asked suddenly. The question hung there, too big for the aisle. Too personal for someone whose last name I didn't know. I swallowed. "Sometimes," I said. "Yeah." She exhaled slow. Relief, maybe. Or disappointment. It was hard to tell with her. Everything was controlled, measured. Even the silences felt intentional. When we walked back to the counter, she kept a careful distance, as if she'd realized she'd stepped too close and corrected herself. I rang her up without commentary this time. Didn't offer a note inside. Didn't say good choice. While the receipt printed, she rubbed her wrist absently. I noticed a faint indentation there, like she'd just taken off a watch she wore too tightly. "You're very observant," she said, without looking at me. I froze. "Am I?" She nodded once. "It's not a criticism." Another pause. The heater clicked again. Somewhere, a phone buzzed and stopped. She took the bag, hesitated, then surprised both of us by reaching out and straightening the crooked stack of bookmarks on the counter. A small, unnecessary kindness. "Thank you," she said. "For the book, or the listening, or something else entirely." As she turned to leave, her hand brushed my sleeve, not accidental this time. Just enough to register. I didn't move until she was gone. And when I finally did, I realized my heart was beating like I'd just stepped somewhere I wasn't sure I was allowed to stand. The third time, the rain didn't stop. It came down steady and unnegotiable, the kind that turns the street into a blurred reflection and makes everyone linger longer than they planned. We were closing late because a shipment had arrived wrong, boxes stacked crooked near the register, the smell of wet cardboard mixing with old paper. She was still there when the sign flipped to closed. "I didn't realize the time," she said, glancing at her phone like it had betrayed her. "I can wait outside if—" "No," I said too quickly, then steadied myself. "It's fine. I just have to finish inventory." She nodded, relieved, and took off her coat. The sweater underneath was thin, sleeves pushed up. I noticed the faint crease lines at her elbows, the way her shoulders finally dropped now that there was no one else around. The store felt different after hours. Quieter, but not empty, like it was holding its breath. She wandered while I worked, stopping occasionally to read a sentence here, a paragraph there. At one point she laughed, soft, surprised, and covered her mouth like she hadn't meant to make a sound. "Sorry," she said. It caught me off guard. "It's okay," I replied. "I like knowing which books do that." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes this time. When the rain grew heavier, she moved closer to the counter, leaning against it instead of pacing. Her fingers tapped once, then stilled. "I shouldn't be here this late," she said, more to herself than to me. "You can leave whenever," I offered. "I know." A pause. "I just don't want to drive yet." I understood that feeling too well, the desire to delay, to stay in a place where nothing was being asked of you. My phone buzzed. I ignored it. Hers buzzed almost immediately after. She looked at the screen and went still. "I have to take this," she said, already stepping away. "I'm sorry." She answered near the back shelves, voice lowered but not enough. I didn't mean to listen. There just wasn't anywhere else for the sound to go. "No," she said quietly. "I told you. I'm not doing this again." A beat. "Yes, I know how long it's been." Another pause, longer this time. "That doesn't mean it didn't matter." She rubbed her forehead with two fingers. When she turned back toward me, her face had changed, composed, but strained, like something had been put back in its place with effort. "Everything okay?" I asked, already knowing it wasn't. She hesitated, then shrugged. "Old life checking in." I nodded, careful. "You don't have to explain." She studied me then. Really studied me. Her gaze lingered like she was measuring the distance between what she wanted to say and what she was allowed to. Sometimes, she began, then stopped. Laughed under her breath. Never mind. The rain thundered suddenly, close enough to shake the windows. She startled, then didn't move away when I reached out instinctively. Not touching her, just close. Too close. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Her hand rested on the counter between us. Mine hovered nearby, uncertain. If I leaned in, just slightly, she straightened instead. I should go, she said, already reaching for her coat. I nodded, even though every part of me resisted. At the door, she paused, hand on the handle. Thank you, she said. Then, softer, for tonight. I watched her leave without stopping her. And as the door shut behind her, I realized how close I'd come to doing exactly that. I didn't see her for almost 2 weeks after that night. Not because she stopped coming. I checked the door every time it opened. Listened for her steps without meaning to. The bell rang and rang for other people, and each time it wasn't her, something in me adjusted downward, quietly. When she finally did come back, it was close to closing again. No rain this time. Just the hum of the lights and the sound of the register drawer sliding shut. She stood near the entrance longer than necessary, like she was deciding whether to cross an invisible line. Hey, I said. Hey, she replied. Her voice sounded steadier than I felt. She didn't browse, didn't ask for help. She came straight to the counter and rested her palms on it, the same way she had before. This time, she didn't smile. I've been thinking, she said, then stopped. Exhaled. That's not true. I've been trying not to. I waited. The quiet stretched. I could hear my own breathing. This, she said, gesturing vaguely between us. Whatever it is. It's starting to feel loud. I nodded slowly. Yeah. She laughed once, sharp and humorless. I come here to be invisible. Do you know that? To stand in a place where no one asks me anything. And then you. She stopped herself, pressed her lips together. You look at me like I exist. My throat tightened. I said nothing. I was afraid if I spoke, I'd ruin the honesty in the air. That's not fair to you, she continued. And it's not honest to me. I wanted to tell her she didn't know me anything, that I wasn't asking. But the truth was messier than that, and we both knew it. She leaned closer, lowering her voice. I don't know what I'm doing, she said. I just know I can't keep pretending this is casual. The word hung between us. Casual. Like something we'd both been failing at quietly. I think about you, I admitted finally. The words came out softer than I expected. More than I should. Her eyes didn't widen. She didn't look surprised. Just tired. And something else, relieved, maybe, to not be alone in it. That's the problem, she said. You shouldn't. We stood there, close enough that the air felt different. Neither of us reached out. It felt more intimate not to. A customer rattled the door, realized we were closed, and left. The sound echoed, then disappeared. I don't want to be the reason you regret something, she said. I swallowed. I don't want to be the thing you avoid. She closed her eyes briefly. When she opened them, they were glassy but controlled. I don't trust myself around you, she said. And that scares me more than wanting you. The silence after that was heavy, irreversible. She stepped back, creating space that felt permanent. I think, she said carefully, we need to stop this before it becomes something we can't undo. And for the first time since I'd met her, I didn't know how to answer. The shift didn't announce itself. It arrived quietly, disguised as routine. She came in on a Saturday morning I wasn't scheduled for. I was there anyway, covering for someone who'd called in sick. When I looked up and saw her standing by the window display, it took me a second to understand why my chest felt tight instead of relieved. She looked different. Not dressed up or undone, just careful, like she'd rehearsed coming in and was now committed to seeing it through. I didn't know you worked weekends, she said. I usually don't, I replied. Guess today's an exception. She nodded, absorbing that, then reached into her bag and pulled something out. I found this, she said, placing it on the counter between us. It was a folded piece of paper. Old. The edges softened by time and handling. I think I left it here, she added. A while ago. I picked it up, but didn't open it yet. You want me to throw it away? No, she said quickly, then corrected herself. I mean, no. I didn't mean that. She looked embarrassed, suddenly younger in a way that had nothing to do with age. "It's a letter," she said. "I wrote it years ago, to someone who never read it. I waited. He died," she continued, voice even but thin. "Car accident. I kept the letter in a book I never finished. I must have left it here the first time I came in." That landed harder than anything she'd said before. Not dramatic, just final. "I didn't come back for it right away," she said. "I think I was hoping it would disappear, or that I'd forget why it mattered." I unfolded the paper carefully. I didn't read it, just held it. "You don't have to," she started. "I know," I said. "I won't." She watched me for a moment, then smiled faintly. Not the smile that started all this. Something sadder. Truer. "You remind me of him," she said, almost apologetically. Not how he looked, how he listened. I didn't know what to do with that, so I stayed still. "That's not fair to you," she added. "I know that." I handed the letter back. Our fingers didn't touch this time. "I don't feel compared," I said after a moment. "I feel trusted." Her breath caught, just barely. "That's worse," she whispered. We stood there with the letter between us like a third presence. Something from her past that had found its way into the present without permission. "I didn't come here to reopen anything," she said. "I just didn't want you thinking this was some kind of impulse." I met her eyes. It never felt like that. She nodded slowly, like that confirmed something she'd already known. After a moment, she folded the letter again and slid it back into her bag. Then, unexpectedly, she reached out and squeezed my wrist. Brief. Grounding. "Thank you for not asking me to explain more," she said. "Anytime," I replied. She turned to leave, stopped, then looked back at me. "For what it's worth," she said, "I don't come here because of him anymore." And then she was gone, leaving behind the quiet understanding that whatever this was between us, it wasn't built on absence. It was built on choice. It didn't happen all at once. That's what surprised me most. There was no dramatic return, no speech waiting to be delivered. Just a Tuesday evening, dull sky, the store half-lit because one of the bulbs had finally burned out and no one had replaced it yet. She came in 10 minutes before closing. No hesitation this time. No rehearsed calm. She looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. Eyes softer, shoulders looser, like she'd set something down on the way over and hadn't picked it back up. "I don't want to pretend anymore," she said, standing a few feet away. Not crossing the distance. Just naming it. I nodded. That felt right. Honest. Me neither. Silence settled, but it wasn't sharp like before. It felt agreed upon. "I've spent a long time being careful," she continued. "Choosing the version of myself that causes the least damage." A pause. "I'm not sure that version is always the most truthful." I leaned back against the counter, giving her space without stepping away. "I don't feel damaged," I said. "I feel steady. When you're here." That made her close her eyes briefly. Not in pain. In recognition. She stepped closer then. Slowly. Like she was giving both of us time to change our minds. "I don't need promises," she said. "I don't want to be rescued. And I don't want to become something you regret once you understand the weight of it." "I already understand," I replied. "At least enough to choose it." That was the moment things shifted, not forward, not backward, just into place. She let out a breath she'd been holding for weeks. Maybe longer. Then, without ceremony, she sat down on the small stool behind the counter. I followed, sitting beside her, close enough that our knees brushed. Neither of us moved away. The store hummed around us. Old building noises. The tick of the clock. Life continuing without waiting for us to decide anything more than we already had. She rested her forearm against mine. Light pressure. A question that didn't need answering out loud. I turned my hand slightly, letting my fingers touch hers. Just once. No grip. No urgency. Her forehead leaned into my shoulder. Not dramatic. Just tired. Just real. We stayed like that for a while. Long enough that the silence stopped feeling like something we were avoiding and started feeling like something we'd earned. "This doesn't fix everything," she murmured. "I know," I said. "It might complicate things. I'm okay with complicated." She smiled. Not the one that started it all, not the one that made my mind wander. This one was quieter. Settled. "Me too," she said. When we finally stood, there was no rush to leave, No need to define what came next. The decision had already been made in the way we didn't step apart. As I locked the door behind us, our hands found each other naturally, like they'd been practicing for this in smaller ways all along. And for the first time since she walked into my life, nothing felt unfinished. I'm telling this from a quieter place now, not because everything turned simple, but because it stopped feeling like it needed defending. Time passed, not in big jumps, in shared routines. Coffee that went cold because we forgot it was there. Evenings where nothing happened except the decision to stay a little longer. The bookstore is still there. I don't work the counter anymore. Someone else does. Sometimes we walk past it together and neither of us says anything. That feels important somehow. What changed in me first wasn't confidence. It was patience. I stopped trying to name things too early, stopped rehearsing outcomes before they existed. I learned that attention, real attention, isn't urgency. It's staying. It's listening past the point where it's comfortable. She changed too, though she'd probably argue with that phrasing. She'd say she just allowed more. Less editing. Fewer exits planned in advance. She laughs easier now, not louder, just freer. She still gets quiet sometimes, still drifts when memories tug at her, but she doesn't apologize for it anymore. She lets me sit beside her in those moments instead of pretending she's fine. What surprised me most was how ordinary love turned out to be. Not fireworks, not obsession, just a slow collapse into honesty. Choosing each other on days that didn't feel cinematic. Understanding that care doesn't always announce itself. It often shows up disguised as restraint. There were moments we could have turned away. We both know that. Age wasn't the real gap. Fear was. History was. The idea that wanting something didn't automatically mean you were allowed to keep it. But we learned that love doesn't always arrive when you're ready. Sometimes it arrives when you're finally tired of pretending you're not lonely. I don't think she saved me, and I didn't save her. That narrative never fit. What we did was witness each other honestly, without trying to rewrite the past or promise immunity from the future. There's still uncertainty. There always will be. But it doesn't scare me the way it used to. Because love, I've learned, isn't about certainty. It's about presence. It's about the quiet agreement to sit beside someone without asking them to be less complicated. It's about choosing the same person again, not because it's easy, but because it feels true. Sometimes I think back to the first time she smiled at me, how it unsettled me, how it stayed. Now, when she smiles, my mind doesn't wander. It comes home. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?